Thank you so much. Maybe we'll invite another candidate to speak to us at some point because of how great Christina did. And thank you for your applause for all these guys. I mean, as I said, they have, as you can tell, they've kind of reached a little bit for you. And that was, we did calls prior to each one of these talks, and I told them, I'm not here to micromanage a word that you say. I'm just asking you to push yourselves. And I hope you guys feel that they really have challenged themselves in these talks. All right, last but not least, a guy who, his hometown paper, I think the Kansas City Star, called him a junkyard dog, which I think he freaking loves. I don't know if I've told him this story, but just so you know, by way of introduction, I actually sat down with him for dinner in Austin, Texas a few years ago, and it was just he and I having a steak that he was paying for, thank God, because it was very expensive, and he's much more successful than I am. And he was just talking about what he did. He's a pureblood, a general consultant, strategist, who happens to be just an amazing business person as well, and entrepreneur. And we sat, probably 2 hours. A lot of him talking, a lot of me listening, which is tough because I like to talk, and I was just kind of enthralled with this. And what I took away from that meeting, and believe it or not, at that time I was a partner in a different business, different world. I was more of a traditional general consultant, strategist type, and I was looking across at a peer, and potential competitor actually. And at the end of that meal, I literally decided, holy cow, this guy loves what he is doing. He feels honored to be able to do what he is doing. And he's better at this job than I am. And literally it was and again, I don't know if I've told you this, but that was the moment I decided that I was no longer going to do what I was doing, because I knew that there are people in this audience and people that you're going to hear from who absolutely have found their place in this world. And they found that the delta of passion and genius, and they've driven kind of a Mack truck through it all. So with his I think the title of this talk is Tales from the Junkyard Dog. Very clever. Please meet and welcome Jeff Rowe.
Overly kind, as Chris will do. So I have two speeches that were somewhat definitional to my career. One was in 2004. I'd elected a member of Congress in 2000, top race in the country, Sam Graves. We won by about 5 votes per precinct, 30 years old, went to be his chief of staff in D.C. I had been his chief of staff in Jefferson City, which is in a state legislature, kind of a chief of no staff. There are 2 of us in the office, but I put up more yard signs, so I was the chief of staff. The other person was the assistant. So it's 2004. There's a road at grade crossing, railroad crossing, where they put in new sticks to go up and down when the train was coming through, and the federal government had donated the money to do so. And so I was speaking on behalf of the congressman at this event. And again, a chief of staff, 30 years old, $150,000 a year. That time there were no limit bans yet. Abramoff hadn't changed the world, so I had tickets to everything I wanted to go to, steaks to every steakhouse I wanted to go to. It was a pretty good life. So I go to speak, and the meeting planner was very rigid. She said, you're speaking from 3:07 to 3:10, have your story, don't go over, read the letter, get off the stage. So I walk up to the stage, and right when I start speaking, the train comes through. And this is no joke, this happened. I speak for 3 minutes, and the train finally made its way past. And as I'm coming off the stage, I said, should I go up and reread the letter from the congressman? He said, no, you hit it perfectly. I had hit my mark, and it had completely been drowned out. My voice was gone, and the congressman was not even to mention. So I thought, on the drive back home, how do I make a more impactful statement in politics? That caused me to start my company, Axiom Strategies, in 2005. Now, in 2004, in the re-elect, we took pictures of a candidate in a parade. We videotaped the candidate giving a speech, and the Kansas City Star said, junkyard dog, bare-knuckled, no holds barred, This is the consultant, this is what our democracy's become. And so I thought, well, that's a pretty good reputation. That's a pretty good brand. So I should go try and sell that brand to other candidates. So I started to sell this other brand of junkyard dog, tough guy, mean, nasty. If you're in a fight, you have to have Jeff Rowe and you have to have Axiom Strategies to grade aplomb. And I started this little regional company to sell to clients that I could drive to. 95% of our clients were within 95 miles of our company. So fast forward to 2014, we are in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm giving a speech with pictures up, and we have polling up. And in Georgia, as you all know from Georgia, it's a religion there. On Sundays, we give the big political talks. It's a fundraiser. People come after church, bring their kids. They're all sitting around these tables. And it's like a Phil Donahue afterwards. They ask questions. The consultants are speaking. The candidates are speaking. We're trying to really get people to support. And so they're passing it around. I've been answering these questions for a while. And it's all about data and analytics. And I'm talking about Moore's Law and Amazon cloud servers and voter segmentation. And I am really into it. And the little girl stands up. It's been going on for about two hours. The little girl stands up, and she stands up to give her the mic, and she said, "Mr. Rowe?" I said, "Yes." She said, "This is very boring." I said, "Okay, well, that'll be the last question." So we ended there. It's been 2 hours. The mother, who's just panic-stricken by it, walks her up to me, and she says, "I'm really sorry that just happened." I said, "It's okay. It is kind of boring stuff." She said, "Well, she's just at that age where she repeats everything she hears." So those 2 times, I was essentially speaking to myself. When the rail cars were going through, I was speaking to myself. And when I was giving this speech, and now we had a company that had done races in 40 of the 50 states and all over the country. We were kind of forward-leaning on data. And nobody cares and nobody listens, and it's very boring. I started to think about what this all means. In that time, the Kansas City Star updated their profile. They have a bit of an obsession with me. And now they called me data-driven. The data-driven wizard, who's also bare-knuckled and mean and nasty and all that kind of stuff. So as I've been throughout the time, in 2006, we have a very difficult race, and we attack our opponent. Our opponent worked for Omnicorp. Omnicorp owns Penthouse. She was a sales lady for Penthouse, so we attack her for that. That got the reputation bigger on the junkyard dog. Then I worked for Ted Cruz, and we used analytics, and that got my reputation bigger on analytics. But as I've been thinking about, and from 2012, 2014, really with the Atlanta speech, is what we are doing really about. And that's what I've come to realize. There's a lot of tools for execution, but what our campaigns are about and what our candidates are about, and more importantly, what I've learned, what we are about, is our brand. We don't talk in politics. I've been in politics for 24 years continuously, where that's all the money that I made was from politics, full time. And I've never walked into a meeting and had a branding meeting. I've never hired brand professionals. What I have done countless times is go into a meeting, get the polling presentation where we talk to 3 or 4, if you're really lucky, 600 people, and have the results sometimes shown on screens like this. And it says, here's the issue that's going to win the campaign that 68% of the people agree with. And then the candidate says, well, I don't know if I really like that. I really like this issue. And we're like, no, that's stupid. There's only 59% of the people that like that issue. So the difference between 59 and 68 in a 400 sample size survey in a congressional district is about 7 people that randomly happen to awkwardly pick up the phone during Dancing with the Stars and tell somebody that they liked, one issue marginally over another, very likely to vote for somebody versus somewhat likely to vote for somebody. And we take that data and act like a bunch of imbeciles and scrub the file and run a regression-based algorithm to figure out how many people fit into that bucket. And then we take that bucket and then we're going to run an entire campaign off what 7 people told us in a 400 sample size survey. Now that's truly ridiculous. And that is truly what all of us and you do. So what is the difference in a brand then? And where can we see demonstrations of brand? You know, there are only 3 types of brands that you can be. And everybody kind of thinks they're all 3, but you're really just one. One is the product leader. And the product leader brand is the most powerful brand. It leads, it innovates, it forces the conversation. And in this election cycle, and I only talk about Republicans, Donald Trump was the product leader. He was a product leader brand. For all the lack of discussion about issues and politics, that's not the case. Donald Trump came up with more policy prescriptions in his race for president than anyone has ever done. Keep in mind, we litigated an entire election for president on whether we should put Social Security in a lockbox or not one year. So he was a product leader. There's a second type, and by the way, in the private sector, that's Nike. Nike is the product leader in their industry and one of the most dominant product leaders because of every single major innovation in footwear has come from Nike. If you put on a pair of Nike shoes, subconsciously you think you can run a little bit faster, jump a little bit higher. That's what a product leader does. There's a second brand that you can be, your candidates can be. The second brand is customer service. There's a customer service brand. In the Republican campaign for president, the customer service brand was owned by Marco Rubio. Like when you were infected with his campaign, you had a sugary response. He was lovely to be around, an uplifting person, and a very comprehensive customer service base. It felt good to be part of it. In the private sector, that's Home Depot. Home Depot versus Lowe's, they have war zones between the two companies. Home Depot actually has a customer service investment. Their brand is customer service. If you Google them and read their brand statement, it is all about customer service. Costco doesn't have that. Lowe's doesn't have it. They have more properties, more shelf space, more inventory, and make less money because they own this customer service brand. The third brand that you can be is operational excellence. And operational excellence on the private side is McDonald's. McDonald's has never won a taste test. Not one time have they won a taste test on their hamburgers. But they sell more hamburgers, have more facilities, make more money because they're reliable, they're sturdy. You can trust what it's going to taste like even if you don't like it that much. In the political paradigm in this last campaign cycle, that was Ted Cruz. He was operationally excellent. You might not like the taste all the time, but he's going to be very reliable, very sturdy, and very concentrated on what he's doing well. So when we take these brands and we talk to our candidates, we lose them when we start talking about data and analytics. And I love data and analytics. There's nothing I like more. And that has gotten me to get more business as I was talking about data and analytics. When I would talk about in that Atlanta meeting, we lost that campaign. And let me tell you what the question was before the little girl asked that question. And she said, well, how are you going to beat your opponent who has a business record and a businessman when you've been in Congress for 26 years? They don't want to hear about the 68% issue versus the 59% issue, which is what I've spent my entire career thinking about. They didn't want to hear that I was going to take pictures of the other candidate and make him look bad when he was walking in the parade. They didn't want to hear that I was going to jump out of a bush and startle him or find out that he took a company and nearly made it bankrupt. That's not what they want. They want to know the brand, the takeaways of the brand. What are they investing in when they put the bumper sticker on the car? And for all of us, something that I think we miss routinely is that we all have our own brands. Sometimes we have a brand that's a public brand that gets us business. I've been thoroughly blessed with a lot of revenue based on being a junkyard dog if you need somebody in a tough fight. I've been thoroughly blessed with a lot of revenue, resources for people that hired us because we do data and analytics in a good way. But the reality is what my brand is that I now use when I'm in sales is I was born and raised on a 100 sow farrow to finish pig farm. Anybody who's born and raised on a pig farm has a certain set of credibility with people that are going to hire you. I got my Eagle Scout at 16, joined the Army at 17, went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma in 18, jumped out of an airplane, got an appointment to West Point for my congressman, and then came back and started serving my community and finishing college and working in politics. That is a brand, that is a narrative that is much more simple for people to understand, much more credibility to the people that want to invest in you, and that are the same stories that our candidates have. Our candidates have those stories. And we as an industry spend too much time looking past the accomplishments, looking past what these folks, what our candidate who was up here, although she's a Democrat, so I'd have to track her and do a bunch of data analytics. I'm just kidding. But what are her accomplishments? And by the way, we're not looking for one thing. There you are. Sorry, I was looking for you. One of the things that we don't do is what a democracy requires of us is have the top 1% of the people be relatable to the 99% of the people that will vote for them. That is simply done by the brand that you put forth in your campaigns and in your candidates. And I think for those of you in the room that do what I do, I think all of you, hopefully I won't be the train going through the tracks as you're speaking. And I won't be the little girl, and thank you for not being the little girl, saying this is very boring, Mr. Rowe. But if I could do anything with a speech, which is the theme of TED Talks, which is to have the kind of surprise reveal, the reveal for me has been that I have a wife and 2 daughters, live a Christ-centered life with a wonderful group of employees, and people rely on me, and we are in the public space to get people elected that share our values. And so in order to do that, in order to have those values reflected, we should find the values in our clients. And not just, by the way, do the things it takes to win, which is smart data, good messaging, do the research, point out the flaws in your opponent, all the things I've talked about that I've done my whole career. But the thing that we don't do, I believe, in my opinion, well enough, and I'm committed to doing in the future, is to find a brand for our candidate. And for those of you in the room today, with one exception, one candidate in the room, find the brand for yourself. It is never too late. When they write stories now about me with the obsessed local hometown paper, they write different stories now. You can change your brand. You can impact your brand. It takes a commitment. But know that your brand is essentially what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's really important to control that. And you can't really control it for your candidate if you can't control it for yourself. So thanks for having me.
All right, so what do y'all think about the TED Talks? Pretty good, pretty good. So that was at Jeff Rowe on Twitter. And again, let's show some love for Dan, for Reed, for Christina, for Jeff. Thank you all. All right, so good. Thumbs up, thumbs down on the format. Good stuff? All right, I like it. Lots of thumbs up. All right, so final words. We are going to break this room down, have a little break, obviously, a little bit of time. 4 o'clock, we will reconvene for the next session. Thank you so much for joining us for the TED Talks. Appreciate you.